This is The Desert by McKenna Hawkes, Marley Messer, and Lucy Taylor. A desert is defined as an area of land which receives 10 or less inches of rain per given year. These dry and arid areas make up 25% of the Earth's landmass and are home to a number of uniquely adapted species. Due to the extreme environment, the species which occupy the area have a number of adaptations that make them able to survive the extreme heat, cold, and lack of water. Due to little water, vegetation is less common in this biome, yet plants such as cacti and brittle brush have adapted to a low water diet in order to survive the biome. Animals such as rattlesnakes and grasshoppers have also adapted to be able to survive the environment. Here is an example of a desert food web, which contains a number of primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Some plants which habitat the desert are cacti, brittlebrush, fluffgrass, and velvet mesquite. These serve as a food source to lower level consumers such as the grasshopper, red harvest fire ant, and antelope squirrel. These consumers then become the prey of larger consumers such as rattlesnakes and collared lizards, which ultimately can fall prey to top predators such as the red-tailed hawk or desert fox. There are five main different relationships between organisms and their ecosystems. The first I'm going to speak about is competition. Competition is the harmful interaction between the same or different species of a limited supply of resources that both the organisms need to survive. Due to competition, certain organisms are constantly interfering with one another. In the desert biome, such organisms as the desert coyote and sidewinder rattlesnake are in a competitive relationship over similar foods such as mice and rabbits. This causes the two to compete and struggle for the same prey. Predation is the relationship between two unrelated species where one acts as the predator by capturing and feeding on the other organism that serves as the prey. In a relationship such as this, normally the prey outnumbers the predator. In the desert, the hawk is a huge predator towards smaller animals such as the antelope squirrel. It hunts down its prey and quickly snatches it up for feeding. Parasitism is the relationship in which one organism benefits and the other one is harmed. The parasite gains nutrition from its host and can obtain shelter and even a habitat on the host, where they can further reproduce and survive. For example, in the desert biome would be the desert coyote and the desert sand flea. The desert sand flea attaches itself onto the coyote and gains nutrition from the coyote's blood. It is able to reproduce and recreate a habitat in the coyote's fur. Mutualism is the relationship between two organisms in which both of the organism benefits from the certain activity being done. The two species may trade resources, services, or protection from predators in this mutualistic relationship. An example in the desert is the yellow woodpecker and the prickly pear cactus. The woodpecker is able to feed on the fruit supplies on the prickly pear cactus as a source of energy. By doing this, the woodpecker can disperse the cactus's seeds, further benefiting both of the organisms. Commensalism is the relationship between two individual species in which one species benefits from the other and the other species is neither harmed or benefited. For example, hawks can build their nests on the saguaro cactus. This action neither benefits or harms the cactus but provides a habitat for the hawk. An example of clump dispersion that can be found in the desert is the prickly pear cactus. Clump dispersion is defined as when individuals in a population are clustered together, creating some patches with many individuals and some patches with no individuals. Clump dispersion is the most common form of dispersion as most animal groups together around their resources. This plant demonstrates clump dispersion by forming large populations where resources are abundant and small populations where resources are scarce. These plants are able to form extremely large populations that take over 25% of the land's vegetation if a clumped group is formed. An example of uniform dispersion in the desert is that of a rattlesnake. Uniform dispersion is defined as a population where individuals are spaced evenly throughout an area. Rattlesnakes demonstrate this form of dispersion because they are found spaced out through the desert in order to avoid an overlap in resources. This species does not occupy its habitat in groups and tends to avoid other rattlesnakes, which leads to them being spread throughout the biome. In order to avoid competition for food and resources, the species spreads itself out and increases its odds of survival by carrying out uniform dispersion. An example of random dispersion in the desert biome is the bobcat. Random dispersion is defined as a population in which individuals are arranged without any apparent pattern. Random dispersion is the least common dispersion pattern as animals usually clump together or evenly space themselves out throughout a biome. The bobcat demonstrates random dispersion around the time of its mating season. When going out to look for a mate, bobcats go to a number of random places that do not form any pattern. During mating, most animals have a predictable pattern, while the bobcat does not show any of the signs of a predictable pattern, showing how the species is randomly dispersed. A survivorship curve is a graphic representation of the number of individuals in a population that can be expected to survive to any specific age. One example in the desert biome is the roadrunner, which typically shows a type 2 curve. The roadrunner has a relatively constant mortality. Birth and death rates are not dramatic at either end of the roadrunner's life, therefore showing a constant decrease in the amount of individuals in the population. The desert has mostly classic biogeochemical cycles. The water cycle, however, is different because of the lack of water. Since there is no water, the water cycle continues, but there is little water to evaporate, therefore none to condensate, and therefore there is no rain. The nitrogen cycle works when animals consume nitrates in the soil and decomposers break down their bodies back into the soil. The same goes for the carbon cycle as plants absorb carbon dioxide and when they die are decomposed into the soil, which offers carbon back into the plants. These cycles are continuous, however, sometimes are halted due to the desert biome. Humans have had a large impact on the environment, especially in the desert. Most notably, the Arabian Desert, which is rich in soil. Drilling for fossil fuels and oil can pollute and contaminate an animal or plant's food and water sources, and humans change dispersion patterns of animals due to their placement of machinery. Also pollutes the air, which can cause acid rain, which hurts the water cycle even further in the desert.